Okay, perfect. Well, it's so great to meet you all. I'm Patricia McLaren, co-founder and CEO of RevShoppe, and RevShoppe is a services company. We partner with a lot of the sales tech stack platforms like Outreach, SalesLoft, Groove, and anything that might plug into a sales engagement platform as well. Are any of you currently using a sales engagement platform? Maybe. Maybe yes,
We use
no.
HubSpot.
Oh, HubSpot. Okay.
Big
Yeah,
And
fan.
same
HubSpot.
here.
The
Okay.
move from Salesforce a while ago is very painful.
See. So HubSpot for CRM and for sales, the HubSpot sales functionality.
Yeah, and then we use Jiminy for kind of call recording.
Oh, great. Okay. Cool. So we partner with a lot of those technologies and are the services or the trusted advisors for companies that need to develop the strategy within those systems, right? So as you can imagine, you invest in a technology, but it's an empty system. And so we have to think about how we are constantly iterating on the strategy within it, and how are we going to use some of the data to really inform what those strategies look like. So that's why RevShoppe was born. I am based in Austin, Texas. So were any of you at the Austin SaaStock event? No,
Brett
No,
was.
unfortunately not.
Yeah, I live in Austin as well.
Oh, you do? Amazing. Awesome. Nice to have another Austinite, another local. It was a great event, and it was great to have SaaStock in our own backyard, and looking forward to the event next year as well in Austin. And also for a little bit of fun, I'm also a world traveler. I spent all of 2018 traveling, backpacking to over 30 countries. And it was the year that RevShoppe was born, actually. Signed our first customer in Italy. So I definitely enjoy world travel when I can. Cool. So today we are going to be talking about a couple things go-to-market related. Number one, when we think about sales execution or actually rolling out a campaign or rolling out a sales strategy, RevShoppe has learned over the years what the three critical pillars are to that strategy. We actually started our company based on just writing content. So if we think about HubSpot sales, for example, what is the actual sequence of emails and phone calls? And so we were developing the sales strategy for our clients, and we noticed sometimes it wasn't even being used. Sometimes, the system wasn't set up to support the strategy. So the sequence itself was not set up for success. So we developed a holistic approach to sales execution, and we'll talk about what those three pillars are today. And then when we think about operational excellence, why that really matters in our sales execution strategy. And just as we scale, how large are our teams today? Curious.
So my sales team is super small. There's just two full-time sales reps. We're doing like all the tasks from prospecting to outreach to account management, and sometimes it's me too.
Awesome.
We've got one SDR, we're hiring for a second one, and then I had a revenue who's kind of like a AE, and then I kind of get involved every now and then. So 2 or 3.
2 or 3. Nice. What about you, Brett?
And right now it's just me. So we're just getting off the ground and moving.
Awesome. All the hats. Brett's wearing all the hats. I love it. Cool. So these will be helpful tips and some tactical takeaways to think about as you scale, as you start to build a team, and how maybe if you do have, 2 or 3 or even yourselves in your seat, how can you really maximize your time and make sure that we have a foundation in place to really be able to scale what's working and what's not, and get rid of what's not. So we'll talk a lot about operational excellence. Okay. So my background is all in technology. I come from a data company called Cadence. We were acquired by ZoomInfo, DiscoverOrg, if you're familiar with those data providers. And now focusing on technology partners and really making sure that clients are maximizing those investments. So I think we can all agree that technology is critical to revenue growth. And typically at this stage, we are investing in technology to scale, right? To really pick up the pace, to be able to be more efficient, to be more productive. And so as we're scaling revenue, we really need to start thinking about investing in technology. But as we start to invest in technology, our systems can start to be really disconnected, right? Now we have silos, we have data not flowing properly between our systems, and reps aren't actually able to get the data that they need, or they don't trust the data, so they're using their own spreadsheets, or they're doing their own thing, and then we're lacking the visibility. So we're starting to create some of that digital disconnect, which also starts to disconnect the people, and not just internally, what rep A is doing versus rep B, but disconnected from our buyers as well, right? And that really is going to be impacting the buyer experience. So as we invest in technology to scale revenue, we have to think about setting this right foundation so that we don't have this digital disconnect as our challenge. So when we think about the 3 pillars to really achieve more of a holistic approach to our sales execution, to our go-to-market strategy, these are the 3 pillars that RevShoppe continues to really advise clients on. And anytime we're developing sales strategy, we want to make sure we're covering all of these bases. Number 1, systems. We'll talk a lot about systems today and operational excellence, but really we're thinking about, okay, do we have the right tech? Do we have the right data in the right place? Do we have governance in terms of who has access and what everybody is doing within that system? And then are we able to properly report on it? Are we able to see what's effective and what's not? What does that look like? How are we actually going back to that data to inform our strategy? Or are we just developing a new sales strategy subjectively? So systems is really the foundation of our sales execution. And then strategy. So once the foundation is built, right? Let's say we're building a house. We got to build the foundation of that house. Now we can start furnishing the house. That's the strategy. So now we can start thinking about the different touch points, the different channels that we're engaging our buyers on, right? And all of this being data driven. But how are we going to be accessing those data points about our buyers? What do we know about them to make sure we're as timely and as relevant to our buyers as possible in the technology that we've invested in, right? All right, so we've built the right foundation from a data and operations standpoint. We've developed the strategy within those systems. The 3rd pillar is execution. So how are we equipping our team, our reps, with the proper resources, with the proper end-to-end vision of what this sales strategy or campaign is, and make sure that they are confident in what that looks like and how they can execute, right? How are they actually going to approach buyers, and what's the step-by-step? A lot of companies will just do strategy. They won't actually look at how the system's set up to support it, or they'll do systems and strategy, but they will send an email to the team and say, it's ready, good luck, right? But really making sure we're covering all 3 of these pillars anytime we're rolling out a new sales strategy. I'll pause here if any of you have questions or thoughts, any particular pillar you feel strongly about diving deeper into.
Feel free to jump in, guys. We're a small group, so we have all the time for all the questions. And that's what Patricia's here for. And hello to Martin, Simon, Art, and Chris who joined us.
Great. Hello, thanks for joining. All right, so as we're thinking about developing new sales strategies, again, we want to think about covering all 3 of these pillars in our planning stages. So developing the strategy. Who are we targeting? What data do we have about our buyers? How can we be as relevant and timely? Where are we going to meet our buyers? What channels are most effective? And then is our system actually set up to support it? And do we have the right reporting mechanism in place to be able to monitor and iterate and optimize over time? And is the team, whether it's 1 or 2 reps, however big the team is, are they set up for success to make sure that they really understand how to execute on the strategy that's been designed? All right, so the pillar that we're really going to focus on today is the systems around operations and operational excellence, if you will. So what does operational excellence really mean? Well, at RevShoppe, we think about operational excellence in a couple different areas, a couple different things to really emphasize when we think about excellence. The right tech. So we'll talk a lot about what should we have in our tech stack? What are the main, it could get really overwhelming when we think about all the tech landscape looks like today. So what's the right tech for my team? The right processes. So we might have the technology, but we have to align it to the strategy, or else we're going to have that digital disconnect and we're not going to get the actual, the utilization or the power of the technology. So we want to build process around tech, the right success metrics and reporting. So we'll talk about what to measure in our sales strategies as well. And then the right enablement. So really sort of emphasizing all three of those pillars and having true process in place to bring all of those together. And then how should we diagnose operations? We're going to talk about something called a full funnel metrics audit that we provide for a lot of our customers to understand where should we create a new sales program, or where are the largest opportunities within our sales program. And that's really based on data. So we'll talk about how to set that up today. Okay, so I know we've got some small teams here. Just for some context too, I'm a founder myself. I'm scaling my team as well. We're a team of about 25 at the moment. And as we grew, we really started to invest in technology, and we really needed to set ourselves up in terms of a foundation to achieve operational excellence as the team grew, right? As we're starting to think about, stepping away from the business ourselves a little bit more and equipping the team to be able to really be set up for success. So operational excellence is the thing that's really going to allow us to not work in the business as much, work on the business to make sure that, again, our team's set up, we can scale, and we can maintain a strong market position as well. So operational excellence is definitely something as you're starting, if you are hiring, if you're starting to build out your team, it's definitely important to set this right foundation now, or at least start to think about some of these items. So the first part, the right technology, we're going to talk about the technology, the process, the success metrics, the enablement, the right tech. So we work with a lot of teams that are just starting to build out their tech stack. I know some of you mentioned that you're using HubSpot. I'm curious, maybe if you want to throw it in the chat or you want to come off mute, how many platforms do you have? Is it 5 and under currently for your sales tech stack, or is it 5 to 10? How many different platforms are we currently working with?
Nothing enabled yet. We don't have a sales team, or that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Okay.
I guess if you count really all the stuff, I think it's easily 5 to 10.
5 to 10. Yeah, they start to add up, right? It's like, oh, well, yeah, we have this plugin, we got this thing over here. So
and then there's the overlap with our other teams. Like we also use Intercom for the customer support, which has so much overlap with sales for us. So it would be 10, I guess, almost.
Almost 10. Awesome. Anyone else?
We've got about 5. Jiminy, HubSpot, LinkedIn, Cognizant, and then we have a virtual assistant who kind of part of our tech stack, doing some data cleaning and that sort of things.
Awesome. Good to hear.
And for us on the sales side, we haven't, LinkedIn and HubSpot and stuff like that, but haven't gotten to the next phase of the full sales stuff.
Cool. That natural progression too. We did the same thing. We're still balancing that and trying to prioritize, like, what are the technologies needed right now to scale and which ones are absolutely critical, and how do we think about, when to bring on certain technologies. So we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's my big question today, is like which of these in your stack would you prioritize?
Yeah.
like CRM over data. I mean, I did sign up for Zoom info once, got some data, but we're just not, it's with our product. We're waiting on a certain product for our B2B audience, but yeah, I'm curious to see how you approached it.
Cool. Yeah, let's jump in. So we work with a lot of companies that are just getting started with tech stacks. And also we're working with a lot of enterprise organizations that are just starting, they're just getting into this digital sales motion as well, right? They're used to just showing up with a bottle of wine, knocking on doors, still being in the field. So this concept of building a tech stack is very new as well. And so we have a lot of conversations with founders or with enterprise companies on like, where do we get started? What does that even look like? And so when we think about sales tech stack, because there's a lot of other, you think about HR and some of these other technologies, but when we think about sales tech stack, these are really the top 5 that we would recommend: CRM, data providers, sales execution, analytics, and sales enablement. So let's talk a little bit about them, then we can share a little bit. Would love to hear from you all on what we have here, or if you do have any questions about the technologies as well. So number 1, you need a system of record. So many of you probably already have a CRM, or if you don't, we would absolutely recommend starting with the CRM. It's your system of record. Everything is going to be integrating into your CRM. So typically all your other systems as well, like if you have a sales execution or any sort of plugins or analytics, it integrates with that solution, and it's actually going to be pulling all the data from that solution. So CRM is going to be your main system of record. We see a lot of folks starting with HubSpot because of the functionality with HubSpot sales as well, and the most cost effective as well. So CRM would be step 1 from our vantage point. And then number 2 is the data provider. So at the beginning, we talked about investing in the technology and investing in an empty system. It's just a vessel, specifically CRM, right? It's like where it's the record holder, but we need accurate and relevant data to actually inform our strategies in that system, right? So data providers are really, really critical to any CRM. So whether it's Zoom info, sales intel is more, we see sales intel at the enterprise level, but any sort of data provider to provide contacts, right? Contact information, basic name, email, phone number, addresses. Typically that's really difficult to get for a lot of companies. So having a data provider as this first stop within your CRM is going to be really important. And then also thinking about some services that can append the data for you as well. So they can go, if records are empty, you can use like an offshore team to go and access that data for you so that your CRM is up to date. Because again, it's going to be the main foundation to your strategy and to any other systems where that data is going to flow. So CRM and then a data provider. You'll also notice some intent data in here as well. So as we start to think about more advanced sales strategies and really using a data-driven approach to sales strategy, we want to be as relevant and timely as possible. So a lot of companies like Bombora, TechTarget, Sixth Sense, they allow you to see what people are searching for. So you may say like, RevShoppe, this account is searching for these keywords. And then we can use that as our entry point to have a conversation with them, right? Hey, we noticed that you're, searching competitor names, or you're searching for security, or you're searching for whatever it is that your company is, whatever your value prop is, right? So you can set up those keywords and really design your go-to-market. You can design your personalization or your sales strategy around it. So CRM, fill the CRM with accurate data. Step 2 is intent data as well. And then sales execution. And this sales execution is usually the system of action, right? So something like an Outreach or a SalesLoft or a Groove, these systems are full platform to send automated emails, to make phone calls from, to provide all of the analytics that you may need to understand what's working and what's not. in your system. And all of the data from your CRM and your data providers can flow directly into an outreach or a SalesLoft or a Groove. So these are really critical to a sales tech stack. It's actually been in this order: CRM, data provider, sales engagement, or sales execution. Those have been the top three in a lot of the sales engagement or sales development teams and reports coming out in the last 2 years. That sales engagement is foundational to the tech stack. Instead of sending one email, we can really scale our activities, and we can automate some of that actions from our sales reps, so we can really just skyrocket our productivity. So Outreach, SalesLoft, Groove are some of the top players as we think about sales execution or sales engagement. Some of the other systems that plug in to Outreach, SalesLoft, Groove, or when we think about our system of action, things like video, Vidyard, OneMob, a lot of these systems, Vidyard has a free extension as well, and it can go a really long way to adding personalization, or even sending like a contractor proposal over when we have an active opportunity. So a lot of really creative ways to use video in our prospecting or in our sales cycles. And then LinkedIn as another, almost like could be a data provider as well, but LinkedIn really accessing our buyers and looking at their profiles for more customization or more personalization, right? Setting triggers on when someone has moved companies, or just creating some advanced filters in LinkedIn Sales Navigator can help us get really tailored in our approach. I'm going to stop there for a quick pause. Questions, thoughts, feedback, anything that maybe if you're using any of these, curious what your experience has been, or those who haven't yet invested in any, open for questions.
Patricia, I got a question. So like on Vidyard, there's a couple different platforms that do like video for sales enablement and stuff like that. How important is it have you found to use a top line account or top line software versus an up and comer or a startup, or one that's sort of doing certain things that you like, but they're not sort of the name brand one? Does that matter? Have you found to people, or is it like, as long as they deliver and no one cares? Because that's what I'd hope it'd be, but.
Yeah, that's right. It's the latter, especially when you're getting started. My recommendation is it doesn't matter. When you're thinking about technology, something like video, typically we recommend going with the video platform that best suits your needs and what you're looking for out of that technology. If it's basic video, like you don't need all the fancy analytics, you don't need everything that comes with it, then it doesn't matter, right? Just try and experiment with how effective video may be as a channel for you. And then as you start to really integrate it into your strategy, you can think about, okay, do we need to expand its capabilities? And if so, what does that look like? And when do we want to start exploring some of the other alternatives? But out of the gate, I'd say it's really just the functionality of basic video that you can get through a lot of other vendors as well. So we started with free version of Vidyard. They're also a partner of ours. So we work really closely with them and helping teams build strategies around video, like how do we get started? What does that look like? When do we send videos? And so they were a primary choice for us to just get started. Great question. Anyone else? Okay, so CRM, system of record, data provider, bring in some of that important data to build strategies around. Sales execution, our system of action, where we're actually going to be engaging with buyers. It could also just be Gmail at the moment for where we're sending emails, and some dialers in here as well if you're using dialers. But this is how we're actually going to be engaging with our buyers. And this category continues to grow and can continue to grow, like we talked about with video or direct mails or things of this nature. So that's the category to start small, start and just run some experiments and see how it impacts your strategy before making some broader investments. And then the last two, analytics and sales enablement. As you start to take more of a data-driven approach to your sales strategies, if you are using your CRM data, you're using a sales execution platform, you're able to track some of your behaviors, like the emails being sent or the calls out of your dialer, and you really want to start actioning based on what that data is saying. Having an analytics is going to be really important as well. So, these are more advanced functionalities for providing some of that intelligence. But typically we can get a lot of that information in our CRM to start. So analytics and sales enablement are sort of more of the advanced within the tech stack, but top three would be CRM, data provider, and sales execution. To speak to the sales enablement, as your team grows, and we ran into this as well as we started to scale the team, is a lot of process documentation, a lot of just product information or value prop sales overviews, etc., decks, resources, case studies. As you start to develop some of these, where they live and how accessible they are for your team is going to be really important. So having a place for those to live, I mean, starting with just a Google Drive or Dropbox or something like this can work as well. But starting to think about more advanced functionalities that can be used. IRAD is a really great, you can basically create like a site, like a Google site or an IRAD page, and you can upload any sort of tutorials or files or videos, etc. And it's really great with clients as well to share with them. So lots of good options, but I'd say when we think about the right technology, when we're starting to build the sales tech stack, CRM, data provider, sales execution, top three. Any other thoughts, questions around the technology? Anything we haven't covered that you have questions about? Yeah, Michael.
Thanks. Not so much a question, but more like a statement or my personal experience. And I think we are mostly operating on the top three layers of your model. We haven't really gone much deeper so far. But even with those three layers, what I can see is, of course, all the tools or most of the tools, they promise, of course, to integrate very well with your CRM, and that is HubSpot in our case. But the experience that I made over and over again, that a lot of these integrations are not like super ideal. They are either limited in terms of how you can configure them, how they sync data is often very limited, and everybody has like different requirements. So some people want to have great bi-directional sync. Sometimes you just want it to be more, etc. So I just want to point out, I'm still like, of course it will never happen, but of course for me, the dream would still be to have as much functionality in one platform and in one tool, because I feel every time we add another layer, another tool, the complexity is just like growing and growing, and makes it even harder and harder for the salespeople to follow process. So that's, yeah, again, just a statement how I feeling about this tech stack. And maybe another comment on the data provider. I'm not sure, it would be interesting to hear what the other guys here, what's their experience. For us, actually, one of the most important data providers is our own application database. Mm-hmm. So I think that's true for most product-led or self-service products or companies. We get like 80-70% of our data actually from our application, like the trial signups, for example. And so just wanted to stress that that for us, integrating HubSpot with our own application database, that was basically step zero. Without that, everything would have broken long ago.
Yeah. Thank you. That's so true. And the way you're thinking about it, of like, how do we simplify and have everything in one platform? Every company is trying to do that. Every company is trying to consolidate right now as well. And so if you're building the tech stack from the ground up, thinking through simplicity, thinking about that and keeping that in mind is definitely key. So, HubSpot, Salesforce, some of these have functionality that you might get from a sales execution and vice versa. So Outreach, Sales Off Groove are very full platform as well. So how can you maybe eliminate some of the other solutions or platforms that you have if you're making an investment like that, right? So definitely some things to think about, but having that simplicity in mind when you're making those decisions is that's right, for sure. Awesome. And then that's a good point around your own data. So if you're getting like trial leads or inbound hand raisers of any kind, one thing to note around those is that they could be sometimes they could be incomplete records, right? Or personal email addresses or something of this nature that we aren't able to follow up in a accurate manner with these leads. And so that's where some of the data appending companies can really help to go and access or update some of the like half-baked records that you may have in your system. So something to think about as well if, you know, going with a full-blown data provider isn't the option at the moment, but we want to make sure that the data that we do have in our own system is something that we can use and follow up with and is updated and accurate. Great. Okay, let's move on. I know we got a lot to cover here. So the technology, as we talked about, is really a critical component in our sales process. And when we think about operational excellence, the next thing that we always recommend is actually sitting down and thinking through what the interplay of these systems actually is in our sales process. So we have a lot of technology. We may be using them at any given time along the sales cycle, along the sales journey. And if we don't think about what that end-to-end journey looks like within the technology that we have, then we start to create some of that disconnect, or we're not actually using the systems as they're designed or getting the most out of those systems, or we're not able to really gather some of the data to understand what's effective and not if we're not using the systems, right? Maybe it's too difficult. I'm going to go back to my spreadsheet. And so if we're investing in technology, many of you mentioned you have maybe 5 to 10 different systems. Sitting down and building the buyer journey and what our actual end-to-end process looks like, and then assigning the right technology along the way. We call it a TPP, or a technology process playbook, saying this is the process from the time we maybe have an inbound lead come in, right? They raise their hand or they sign up for a trial. What is the buyer journey? What does that actually look like? Or what's the sales process to close? And then what systems are we going to use along the way? And how are the reps going to be using that system? And that's really, really important, not only for, again, usage of the technology that you're implementing, but so that we have standard process and we're gathering the data within those tools. We're making sure that all the tools are speaking to one another. So this is a very basic example of a stage one. Let's say we're doing prospecting, or again, an inbound lead comes in. What are the systems that we're using? Well, we might use our CRM, right? Or where are leads coming in from? Maybe it's our own database, right? How are we accessing that data? What does that actually look like? And then is that flowing into a CRM? Maybe is that flowing into our sales execution or engagement platform? Where is it going, or how are reps accessing it? Like, what is that process looking like, right, around the technology? And then as that opportunity gets qualified, what are we using further? Maybe we're using video at this point to send proposals or contracts or whatever that might look like, right? Or how are we using CRM? What's the process? And so it's really important to start thinking about that journey, the sales process, and mapping it to the technology that you have. Questions, thoughts? Sound like an exercise we could benefit from.
It sounds like you rely a lot on the video selling. Do you have any insights, or maybe it's coming up in the future, but as far as like the content of that video, the time, the content, the hooks, anything that you're saying that's making your video strategy work well for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I'm happy to share more. Maybe Jovi, I can send a separate, or I'll add it into this deck when this gets shared out as video tips and tricks. we do use a lot of video, especially in this remote selling world. It's like it's a personal touch that tends to convert at a much higher rate than an email. So there are a lot of different places that video selling can occur in the sales process. Number one, for prospecting, cold prospecting, or following up with hot inbound leads, etc. So within prospecting, if there's something that you can do that's relevant to the buyer, let's say you are designing websites, or you are there's something specific about, like, you could pull up share their website in a video and say, hey, I was looking on your website and noticed these 3 things that I wanted to point out, right? So making it specific to their use case, making it very relevant to them, or showing a particular part of your platform, if you have a product in a video, is really helpful rather than trying to explain it in text. So little snippets, right? Hey, we talked about XYZ, or you raised your hand, you were interested in this particular part of our platform, wanted to send you a quick 10-second video and show you some cool functionality, right? So video in that very top of funnel is very, very useful. If there's any sort of handoff process, many of you may just be full cycle and it's the same person closing to account management. But if you're introducing anybody else into the customer account or experience, a video is a great way to do that, is hop on together and say, hey, it's been great working with you. I am excited for the next step here in the journey. Also wanted to introduce you to so-and-so, and so they can put a face to the name on who you're introducing. So that's always a great, refreshing and easy handoff. And then video selling in terms of contracting. So we never recommend sending somebody a proposal or sending somebody a contract blindly without providing context. So if you're sending any of the documentation, running through it in a video, explaining or calling out really important aspects that you want to provide context around is really helpful as well, because typically people are you send them a contract and they just scroll all the way to the bottom and look at the price. And so how do we make sure that we're really pointing out some of the important aspects in the proposal that we really want them to pay attention to? So those are some that jump out immediately, but happy to send a couple more over.
That's very helpful. Thanks. Yeah, I would love to get my hands on, I don't know if you have a shareable template that's worked for you in terms of even a contract, maybe obviously omit specifics, but I'd love to see how visual that is. It sounds like your approach is very visual, very personal, high touch, which is interesting.
Yes. Yep. High touch, personal, as relevant and timely as possible is going to convert at the highest rate, especially right now. It's really saturated when we're trying to reach out to buyers. So any way that we can stand out and be a little different, video is a key component to that. Again, putting a face to the name, making it a little bit more personal, and making it specific to them. So again, if it makes sense for your product or service, where we can hop on and show them their page, or their LinkedIn for anything, or anything related to their business, it really helps they notice, right? Oh, this is for me. It's not just a blanket video that they're sending to everybody. So I do have some examples and some templates, so happy to share a couple more use cases across the sales process and some examples with you. I'll put it in this deck. Cool. Any other questions, thoughts?
All
right.
I've hey, this is probably a basic one, and I'm not a salesperson, but trying to do founder-led sales. So, but there's probably two and a half of us doing sales right now. I just really struggle to actually figure out what is a lead, when is that an opportunity, when a lot of our leads are coming through from existing contacts, so they're already in the CRM, and then they'll kind of be somewhat interested in. And then even just trying to figure out, at what point do I create a lead, or we use Zoho for our CRM, and then just sort of working it through. I end up having a notebook full of to-dos to contact people. My LinkedIn is full, and my CRM is, and nothing actually is my system of record. So I feel like it's a process thing. Maybe I just need to be a bit more diligent, but anyway, I'm sure there are others out there. So I just thought I'd throw that out there and see what you'd recommend.
I'm so glad you bring that up. Yeah, that's exactly why this component is so important, the process, because what you're saying, and especially at the beginning when we may not have that process mapped out yet, and we have, this information living in a lot of different places yet. And so it would be very helpful to just sit down and build out what that looks like in an ideal world, right? So we get these leads that come in. Where are they coming from? Okay, where do they go? Do they go into your particular system, or they go into CRM yet? Or what does that look like? Where are they coming in from? And then what is the technology, and how do we get it to where we want it to live? Like, what is that process? So it is definitely a process component to map out from the time that lead comes in to the time you're following up, with the emphasis on the technology, because the technology is going to be how you standardize and how you prevent some of the manual, I'm going to write it down on my sheet, and then I have to remember to come back to the sheet and then, I forgot because I've got this whole inbox over here. And so the technology is really going to help us standardize some of that and eliminate some of the manual inefficiencies in our process. So it sounds like an opportune time to just keep it simple and say, okay, where are these leads coming from? Step by step, where do I want them to flow? And then what do I need to do? Maybe I do need to set my CRM up a little bit differently in order to make that happen. But thinking about how technology is going to help you throughout that process is going to be really important to map out.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. And it might even be helpful, and I'm happy to work with you guys on this too, of just building a simple process map, like a visual, and saying, okay, what does a typical inbound lead response flow look like, right? From the time it comes in to, when do I create an opportunity? When do I move it to the next stage? When do I close it? Like, what does that visual look like as a very first version of this sales process? Might be helpful to align the two.
Yeah, I agree.
I would also be interested in seeing something like that maybe afterwards, because we struggle always with the same question. Everybody has their own definition of lead, opportunity, whatever, and you can write Notion pages as much as you want. People they ignore it, or I don't know. It's also easy to miscommunicate. I would also be interested. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Especially when you're a small team, everybody's just going to do whatever works for them at that moment in time, right? And that's why it's also really helpful at an early stage to think about the technology, because the technology again is going to help standardize, and it's an easy business case to justify to the team of it's gonna eliminate you having to do it. It's gonna be easier for all of us, right? It'll save you time if we do it this way. So typically the technology, we make tech a teammate. That's what we always say. We make technology a teammate. We make tech a part of the process so that everybody can follow suit. Everybody can do the same sort of process. We're all rowing in the same direction, if you will. So yeah, I'm happy to share that. So 2 things I'll add: one specifically around video selling and a few options to get started, some tools like free extensions that you could use as well, and then a couple examples on where to include video in your sales process, and then what a general sales process might look like from inbound to close, just a visual process, and then how we want to start mapping technology to it. That would be a good next step for you all, perhaps based on what you have in your tech stack. Okay, so right tech, again, whatever we need to get started, top 3: CRM, data providers, sales engagement, or sales execution. Even within those categories, there's a lot of opportunity to start, just run some experiments and start before really investing in and adopting it into your sales process long term. But those are the key elements. And then designing your process. So actually, what is the process from, inbound lead to close? And then where does that tech actually help along the way? How can we make tech a teammate to standardize? Okay. The next component to this, once we have a process and once we have technology helping us along the way, we can start getting into a rhythm of tracking our behaviors and then really starting to develop a data-driven sales motion and like data-driven approach. What is actually working? What is not working, right? And at this stage, it's really important to take a lot of experiments, right? To run a lot of tests, to just try everything and anything and see what sticks. And as we start to develop some of those strategies and start to gain traction in one or the other, we can really double down on it. And so data becomes a really important component to continuing to scale, again, what's working and what's not working. So some of you may have some of these metrics captured in your CRM. If you don't have any technology yet, this may be manual today, and you may not be tracking activities or meetings, et cetera. So something to think about in the future as you start to invest in more technology and start to build more of a data-driven approach. But the way to think about this as you start to track your sales activities is start really broadly, and then we want full funnel visibility. So we want to know, it seems really almost like micromanaging to like track the number of emails we send and the number of calls we make. And it's less about hitting certain metrics, like you need to send 100 emails or you need to send 100 calls. It's more so just trying to understand what it takes to actually get in front of our buyers, like what is actually working, right? Can we send 5 emails and get a response? Or even if someone raises their hand and comes to us, how many touches does it actually take to get in touch and, you know, initiate a trial, for example? So it's just helpful data to gather, not build like any sort of expectations around, if that makes sense. But we do want to start broadly. We want to say, can we track emails, calls, the social activities that we are completing? And then how many of those turn into conversations? Like how many times when we pick up the phone are we getting a response and we're having a conversation with someone? Or how many times are we sending an email and we're getting a reply? It's really important to know so that we can work smarter in the future, right? We can have smarter content, we can have smarter, faster sales cycles, et cetera. And so we want to be able to monitor some of this. So how many activities turn into connects? And then how many of those connects turn into meetings? How many meetings are we booking? Whether, again, they're hand raisers, they're coming in through trial or through some of our inbound channels, or are we reaching out to and booking meetings with and generating interest? So what does that look like from activities to meetings? And how many of those meetings are turning into opportunities? And then how many of those opportunities are turning into revenue? So we do want, ideally, a full funnel view and being able to really see, okay, we've sent this many activities, we turned into these many opportunities and this much revenue. I will say many companies don't have this locked in. We don't, all the clients we work with don't just yet. It's really difficult to get this full view, especially when we have a lot of different technologies, or we don't have technologies to track some of these items yet. But this is an ideal state when we think about the right metrics to look at. How many of us can track the activities today? Okay. And how often are we looking at the metrics? Are we looking at the metrics to see how many activities we're sending on a regular basis, or how are we using any of the data yet?
For us, it's kind of more, I guess, managing the inputs of the SDR. So it's something that we're quite hot on in terms of like contacts added, calls made, things like that. But what's interesting here is the engagement piece of, at the moment, we're capturing like connected calls, but what I don't readily see is email response rate or other kind of engagement metrics that would actually be really useful.
That's great. Yeah. Like, are they contacting? Who are they contacting? How many contacts per week or per day, whatever that might look like for your team. But then are those activities turning into anything, right? And which ones are? If there are certain calls, certain reps that are really that have high connect rates, or certain emails that have really high opens and replies, let's look at them and let's see what we can scale. What's working? Let's do more of that. And if we're sending emails that, you know, we sent 100 emails and we've got a big 0% open and reply, well, let's stop sending the email that isn't as effective, right? So the engagement piece is really important to know, are those activities the right ones that are going to generate conversations, that are going to generate interest, meetings, etc. It's great. Any other questions on this component or feedback, personal experience?
Which ones of these is hardest for you to track? Because it's all about measurement, right? Through the, I love what you said about full funnel visibility. Which parts of this funnel are hardest for you, and how do you overcome that?
It's a great question. Bottom of the funnel is more difficult. So typically you can have a system, even if it's something in your like Yesware, for example, or something in your inbox. Typically it's easier to track emails, calls, socials, etc. And then if you're using some of the systems that, you know, your peers have mentioned today, we're able to see connect rates, we're able to see replies. Typically we can see meetings booked as well. So the top three, usually we can access from some of the tech in our systems. Where it gets tricky is how we can continue to attribute some of that to opportunities and revenue. Based on how opportunities are created and how it's tracked in the system, it may be difficult to basically tie an activity to a particular person and make sure that person is on the opportunity, and make sure the opportunity, you know, like we have that full view, that full track. So typically opportunity and revenue is more difficult, and usually they're in different systems, which makes it a little difficult as well.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay. So hopefully this gives some a new way of thinking around our technology and our process, and being able to measure the process and getting really specific on what's working and what's not working, and being able to use that information to continue to iterate on our strategy, right? And if we're going to start incorporating things like video, it's important to know like how many videos we sent, and did people watch it, and did we book meetings from that? So this is a helpful concept to really start thinking about. And as you build more or invest in more technology, thinking about building like dashboards that show each of these as well may be helpful, in what a lot of companies do. Okay, so this is an example of what we talked about. So a lot of companies have like, here's activities, here are the meetings that we booked, here's the pipeline, etc. So based on the information you have in your CRM, play around with it and see if you can start to build this view. Can you build a report on activity? Can you build a report on meetings? And start to be able to see what that full funnel looks like. All right, I know we're getting close on time. So the next stage to this operational excellence is really we talked about systems, and now how do we use that to develop our strategy? This is an example of a like very tiered messaging approach that a lot of our clients use to get started if they were doing any sort of prospecting or engagement with their customers. So low, mid, high. I'll definitely be sharing this out, can share more information on this, but the idea is to use the data that you have about your buyers. And if you don't have any, right, maybe you just have a lead record and you don't really have anything else about them, we can't personalize, we can't be as high touch with that particular lead. And so we want to maybe create more of a general strategy to reach out to them. Whereas for a high touch lead, maybe we have a lot of rich insights. We know a lot about them. We can see their behavior. You know, there's a lot on their LinkedIn or something that really shows we can be as personal and relevant and timely, in which case we want to have a really tailored, personal, high touch approach where we're this is where we would insert maybe our video or our manual emails, our very personalized approach. So as you're developing a messaging strategy, you want to think about having different tiers and when to use which tier based on how much data is available about your buyer. Okay, we've got 2 minutes left. So before we wrap, actually, I'd love to hear from you all on this piece, this sales strategy component. Is this helpful, or a lot of you spending time developing some of these touch patterns or sequences or approaches? Yeah, curious on your experience with this component. Or any questions on this component?
Yeah, so we are doing that a lot with varying success. I think for us, most of our 2 sales reps, they're pretty much doing what they think is right, and what we lack in is like comparing what does really work. So they all cook their own recipes. Got
it. Yeah, that's where this comes in handy as well, right? To start looking at, okay, what sequences are they using most? Which ones are actually converting and seeing engagement, and are they booking meetings? And then if we're starting to see like comparison, which ones do we want them to actually use, and can we consolidate? Can we get rid of some of the ones that aren't as effective? And having a tiered approach, like having options for reps to use, again, based on what data is available, is going to be really important as well, right? Something more hands-off, more general in nature, and then some that are really specific to that buyer based on the data you have. Great. I can share more on this component. This is again where RevShoppe got its start. We developed a lot of sales strategies and sequences for clients. And so if you have any questions, you want to dig in deeper on this component, I'm here to help. But we'll share this out. And these are great starting points. And then using that data to understand which ones are working and not. All right. Well, to wrap everything up today, we talked a lot about operational excellence. What are the actual pillars? What does that mean if we are rolling out a strategy? So number 1 is the technology. So what's in the tech stack? How do we evaluate those tools based on what we need? What are the main categories? CRM, data provider, sales engagement, analytics, and sales enablement, starting with the top 3. Once we have technology, we want to build our process around the technology. And so what is that end-to-end process to map out? And then where are we using the tech along the way? And what does that process look like for our reps? And how do we need to configure the tech in order to make that process possible? And then how do we make sure we're reporting on that process and actually looking at the data to make some of those decisions on what we scale and what we deprecate? And really building a process around that every week, every month, every 2 weeks. What does that look like to inform our strategy? And then lastly, execution. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but making sure that if you aren't the user, you're scaling your team, you got 2 or 3 reps, making sure that they know this process that you've designed and how to use the technology so they're set up for success as well. And they're not thinking about shifting back to their spreadsheet, right? They really understand how to use the systems to execute on the strategy and the process so that we can better measure and we can scale together as the team grows. So hopefully this was helpful for you all. There are a ton more slides here that I'll share out, more around messaging, more around training and enablement, and more about technology. I'll add some video selling in here and process map. If you have any questions, if you want to continue the conversation with me, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to talk through anything or support. And you can always reach out to RevShoppe as well.